Are you ready for a show that talks sports from the fans' point of view?
We've seen Michael Jordan score 37 points a game in his era. How many could he score in today's NBA?
There's not a player out there who I'd rather have than LeBron James.
Are you ready for a show that isn't afraid to challenge anyone when it comes to sports? If Adam Silver really wanted to fix tanking in the NBA, he would stop rewarding teams by giving them the best chance to win the draft lottery.
I mean, how many times will Roger Goodell drop the ball on handling domestic violence in the NFL?
Look, athletes have every right to talk politics, but if the fans stop tuning in, that's their right.
Then you're ready for Talk Back, a podcast where two fans debate the media narrative and discuss the world of sports as we see it.
Welcome to the show.
It's time for the latest edition of Talk Back. Justin and I are in the studio tonight. It is actually Tuesday evening, so we know the results of Game 1 of each of the conference series finals, but we do not know yet the results of Game 2 of the Cleveland Cavaliers and Boston Celtics, but we have that up on the television here in the studio, so if you hear me scream a time or two, it might be because the Celtics are winning again. Justin, I got to tell you, though, I have to give a shout-out to a guy by the name of Rob out of Rochester, New York. He actually works with my sister, and my sister said that the other week she walked into the break room at her office, and it was the weirdest thing. She said, I heard my brother's voice, like he was sitting right in the room talking sports with somebody. She said, I looked around, I don't see my brother, Eric, and yet there's my coworker, Rob, listening to the Talk Back podcast on his lunch break. So, Justin, I thought that was pretty cool. Thank you to Rob in Rochester, New York, for listening to us each and every week.
Yeah, definitely very cool. It's always fun when people tell you they like your show, or they say, hey, you guys are a lot better than I thought you would be. It's kind of a backhanded compliment, but hey, we'll take it anyways because, look, we are fans. We're on a podcast. We're not professionals doing this. So when people think you're better than you're going to be, yeah, we'll take that, and we'll keep trying to get better at it.
Absolutely. We have a good time. We're still going to have a good time, even talking about the Game 1s of the NBA Conference Finals.
Well, I don't know if you're going to have a good time.
Well, I know. And so for our listeners who are probably getting overwhelmed with all of the LeBron talk, Justin came into the studio tonight with his show notes, and I see right there on the top of the page, leading off in segment 1, the Warriors against the Rockets. So we'll do a lot of talk about that Western Conference Finals series. And then in Talkworthy segment 2, a lot of happenings around the world of sports, particularly one thing that Justin and I are interested in with the legalization of gambling, how that affects daily fantasy sports and the broader culture of sports in general. All that and more coming right up.
Well, it's time for segment 1. And you know, we cover the biggest topic going on in sports, and right now it is the NBA playoffs once again, but this time a little bit different way to start the show because we need to talk about what went down on Monday night. And Eric, that is the Golden State Warriors. They went into Houston, and pretty much in the second half, they took it to the Rockets, ended up with a double-digit win at Houston. We talked about it last week. Sometimes these series, when they open up, there's all this hype. This series has been talked about and hyped up from really as soon as the Chris Paul trade happened back in the summer. Everybody just kept waiting for these two Goliaths to collide, Rockets, Warriors. But we talked about it last week. We both liked the Warriors in 5, I think. We said potentially it could go to 6 if Houston could shoot the lights out of the gym because they shoot so many threes. But boy, Eric, I know you're not a Warriors fan, so it had to hurt you watching Game 1 on Monday night because you had talked about it last week. Cavaliers may be in trouble no matter who comes out of the West, but certainly from the Warriors standpoint, they look spectacular.
Yeah, Justin, we talk a lot of basketball. I want to get your coaching insights on a couple of things. But first and foremost, I texted you a couple times during the game, and I said that there is no way the Cavaliers can keep up with this pace and this speed from the Golden State Warriors. More than likely couldn't even keep up with the Rockets at that pace. Both teams were going nuts in the first half. It was 56-56 at the half. And then you saw sort of that second gear that we talk about with those Golden State Warriors, the game style that we've talked about for months on this show. When you're shooting a lot of shots behind the arc for three-pointers and you have a high efficiency rating like the Golden State Warriors did last night, you can open up a margin really quickly. Now, I give kudos to the Rockets because the Warriors extended a margin in the third quarter. The Rockets fought back and forth a couple of times, but you saw in the fourth quarter that the Warriors were just primed and ready to put them away. Their efficiency, their shooting, it's like nothing I've really ever seen. And I keep saying that over the last 4 years. It's like nothing I've ever seen. So that style of basketball is something that whether it's the Rockets, whether it's the Cavaliers, whether it's the Boston Celtics, I think we were watching last night the beginning of the NBA Finals, essentially, because I have the belief that whichever team comes out of this Western Conference Finals is going to be your NBA champion this year.
The Western Conference teams, specifically Golden State and Houston, they just play at a different level. I mean, it's just a different type of game. Boston seems like they could potentially get to that point because they have a team that fits together. But that's what makes it so hard with Golden State. And we've talked about it, like everybody of their big four plays their role very well. They're all basically selfless basketball players. You know, you didn't see Steph upset at all that he didn't shoot the ball well, didn't have a great scoring night. It was a night where Clay went nuts and Durant went out of his mind, which I think he can do anytime because I don't think that they have an answer for him. We talked about that on the show last week. Who on Houston is going to stop Kevin Durant? Now, it's not just a Houston problem. Kevin Durant's a problem for almost everybody because he's a 7-footer. And especially now with everybody playing pick and roll switching, you put a big on him, he takes him to the bucket. You put a little guy on him, which is basically 6'8" or less, he shoots over him. They took a great team. They put one of the top 3 basketball players in the country on it. And this is the result, is these guys, they play selfless basketball. And I remember back, it might have been towards the end of the Pelicans series, Steph has a wide open layup, turns around, shoves it to Durant, and he hammers it. And just the way that they sort of embrace their high five, you could just tell that like they're bought into the system. It's all about just winning championships. And I told you that at the beginning of the playoffs. Up until round 1 started, we had not seen a healthy Warriors team since the NBA Finals in 2017. And we hadn't seen them play a meaningful basketball game for them. And now you're starting to see them ramp up, and it's something to behold.
I have 3 takeaways from this first game. Now, we try very hard, even on Twitter, we try very hard to stay away from recency bias, to try to stay away from those hot takes, those first fakes, all of those things that we bust on.
The Warriors are the greatest of all time.
Oh, they're never going to lose
the Pelicans. This is the most overrated team ever.
We don't like that stuff, and so we do try to avoid that. But if you watched Game 1 and you watched the 2 series prior to that, you see what Golden State is doing, and you see how good they can be. My 3 takeaways from this game are this, Justin. You hit the first one. Kevin Durant was incredible in that game, and if you didn't have a guy by the name of LeBron James, Kevin Durant is the best basketball player in the world. Not only is he 7 foot tall, but he plays like a guard. He has the agility of a guard. He has the shooting prowess of a shooting guard. He is everything you would hope to have out of a guy that big and that powerful and that dominant on your team. The second point I'm going to make about this as far as the takeaways is probably the biggest one. The way that the Raptors were mentally distraught after they lost to the Cavaliers the way that they did to open their series is the same way I feel that Houston might feel after this game, because they had home court advantage. They come into their own building. They open up hot. They're playing okay in the first half, and they gave it all that they had. By the time the game is over, they lose by double digits. And if you're the Rockets, I think mentally you're thinking, what more can we do?
They didn't play a bad game.
Well,
they didn't play awful. I mean, they still shot the ball decent from 3. They had, 16 turnovers, I think, in game 1. But yeah, to your point, it's not like they went out and shot 5 for 35 from 3.
But my point in my third takeaway was going to be more of a question to you as I watched the game. And I think actually the announcers on the game talked about it a little bit last night, was the fact that Houston plays a lot of iso ball. They play a lot where you have James Harden taking up so much of the shot clock and then either taking the shot or dishing it to another player who has maybe 3 seconds to shoot the ball. Now, they shoot so well that a lot of times they're still going to score 120 points and it doesn't really matter. Last night, when you saw the second half of that game get out of control a little bit, I think that play style actually hurt them. There wasn't a lot of ball movement. They're not moving without the ball. They're not setting plays in their offense. They're getting a lot of ISO, a lot of, I'm going to take this three, and that's all that's going to happen on this possession down the floor, and you're hoping for an offensive rebound by Capella if you miss. And when those things start to fall apart, the Warriors open up a big lead on you. So, Justin, my third takeaway is I think the Rockets, although they played well, just in terms of how many points they scored, I don't think they play the style of basketball that's going to keep up with the Warriors.
You go back to any episode we've talked about the Rockets, I've said time and time again, they're a team that's built to dominate in the regular season and go so far into playoffs, but I just don't think that style. And look, Golden State is phenomenal. They could go down as one of the best teams of all time, so it's tough to put them against that litmus test. But you saw what happened. Harden got worn out. Everything they ran was isolation ball for him. We've seen it happen with LeBron. You see it happen with other guys that have to take on such a burden. They just wear out. We saw it last year happen to the Rockets. Their offense is so simplistic. They come up and they run high screen pick and roll to try to get the mismatch. And then it's like, okay, Harden, Chris Paul, go to work. If they beat their man off the dribble and help comes, you see the lob to Capella or kick out to the three-point shooter. If no help comes, they get a dunk. That can only go on so long. If you miss those threes or if you're missing those interior shots, Golden State was just taking advantage of them, getting in transition, getting out and running. So you saw Golden State, multiple guys were involved in scoring. You saw Nick Young hitting shots as well. You know, Looney came off the bench and had some big moments for him. It doesn't feel like the Rockets have that type of performance available to them from other guys. You know, they need Eric Gordon to step up. And we talked about that weeks ago. Who is the third option for this team? Capella does everything great, but he doesn't get his own offense. He is getting lobs. He's getting putbacks. He's getting dunks. You can't beat the Warriors in that manner.
And Capella played really well last night, but you saw the impact of Draymond Green, as crazy as he is. And I'm not sure he plays every minute of every game in this series. I mean, he almost got thrown out of this game within the first quarter. But when he's on the floor, love him or hate him, Draymond Green is a force. I mean, he's everywhere. He reminds you of if like Varejao from Cleveland years ago was actually an all-around good player. That's like Draymond Green. Draymond Green's a very good basketball player, can pull up and hit a three, can be wild and crazy down like a Dennis Rodman down underneath the basket in the paint. He can be that fierce presence that you need. Capella had a really impressive game, but to counteract that, the Warriors had Draymond Green doing the dirty work down in the paint, which frees up Kevin Durant, and then your other shooters, Thompson, and although Curry didn't have a great shooting night, he was present at least as far as running around the floor doing the things that he needed to do. I mean, and then we didn't even mention Iguodala. Iguodala is a great playoff basketball player. Take nothing away from Andre Iguodala. So really, the roster of the Warriors has so many more pieces outside of Draymond Green that as Green is keeping Capella busy, I think it nullifies any impact that Capella has. And now you are relegated to what Chris Paul and James Harden do. It's easy game.
Again, the Warriors they're just built for success because, and look, all the pieces for your Warriors just fit together so well. Even Draymond Green on Monday night, he only had 5 points in that game, yet he was a plus 19. He affected the game in every way. And you saw it in the Pelican series. They had him on Anthony Davis, and he did a pretty good job on them where it let them keep that Hampton 5 or their Death 5, whatever they want to call them, where they can go with a smaller lineup, keep Iguodala out there with the other big four. The Rockets' game plan is just attack Steph every single time because he's the weak link in that lineup. And that can only work so far where, again, like you said, Capella was 6 of 7 from the floor, but what was that outside of a lob or outside of a putback? He's not a guy that they're worried about. He's not going to step out and hit a jump shot. In fact, the other night, I think he had one where he shot one at the end of the buzzer and hit it off the side of the backboard. He's not a guy outside the paint that scares you. I mean, he's probably a better shooter than Ben Simmons, but he's still not to the point yet where he scares you. He's just a better version of Tristan Thompson, a more athletic version. So on the defensive side, he's great. But again, this is why I talked last week about liking the Warriors in 5, because they're just built for this. And I don't believe Houston presents them that many problems because Harden had 40 and they were at home and still got beat by 13. That's what scares me because how do you stop this Warriors team? Which player do you stop? Because right now, to me, Eric, when you look at mismatches and players, I mean, there's 2 great ones in this series. Harden is a guy that is as difficult to cover as anyone in the league. And then you have Durant. But, I mean, it's hard not to say that Durant is not the guy in the NBA that